the week, hopefully. All right, today's topic is Cain and Abel, which is if you have a Bereshit in front of you, chapter 4, it will be helpful. You don't need it, but it will be helpful. The Torah tells stories in a very telegraphic way. It leaves out many, many details. So it's complicated to figure out exactly what's happening, what isn't happening. And also, since there's so many lacunae in the story, so every commentator, every reader can fill it in as he or she thinks makes most sense. So let me start from the beginning. It says, now the man, Adam, knew his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gained a male child with the help of the Lord. Cain, the Hebrew word Cain, comes from the Hebrew word kaniti. I acquired a child. I acquired a child from the Lord. Now you'll notice two things here. Number one, the baby was named by Eve, not by Adam. Eve was now the power in charge of things. And that goes back to last week's talk, where I said Eve was the one who had the guts to eat from the forbidden fruit. And because she ate from the forbidden fruit, she began really the history of humanity. She became the mother of all future generations. So her first child, she says, I have a man. Now, it's not just that she has a man and she's naming the child, but when you say I have a man, she is expecting something from this child. Here is someone of substance. Here's a man. Here's a being that I got through the blessing of God. Then it goes on, and then she bore a son, his brother Abel. Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain became a tiller of the soil. Who names Abel? The answer is, no one says anything. When she gave birth to Cain, she gave Cain a name. This is a son. Oh, right, I have a boy, I have a man. When she named Abel, she didn't give any name at all. What does Hevel mean? Hevel means breath, wind, nothing, emptiness. Cain represents solid, established, real, a man. And Hevel doesn't even deserve to be named. It's just vanishing, a wind. Maybe that's a prologue to what's going to happen. Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain became a tiller of soil. All right, we want to develop humanity. We're starting from the very beginning. What do we need more, farmers or shepherds? The answer is, what we really need if we want to have a civilization, we need farmers. We need people who are going to stay at one place, till the soil, create food, create villages, take care of themselves in one place. Shepherds are nomads. They just go from one place to the other. They follow the sheep. Doesn't require any particular skill or talent, or not very much work compared to a farmer. A farmer has to really work hard. So at this point in the story, if you know Cain is a farmer and Abel is a shepherd, which one of these two is more important? Which one of these two is more significant for the future development of society? I would say Cain is more important. The farmer is certainly much more important than the shepherd. The shepherd is a nomad. The shepherd is not going to build a civilization. The farmer can create the foundation of a civilization. That's how we're starting. Now what happened? In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil. Who commanded Cain to bring an offering? Answer, nobody. Cain, out of the goodness of his own heart, so to speak, we don't know anything about why he did this. He is the one who brought an offering first. Cain is the firstborn. Cain somehow felt he should bring an offering to the Lord, and he brought what he produced. He's a farmer, so he brought the fruit from the soil as an offering to God. Up until this point, do we know anything about the upbringing of Cain and Abel? They had parents, Adam and Eve, but the Torah doesn't give us one conversation, one word between the parents and the children. It leaves it open. How did they raise these kids? One sentence says they were born. The next sentence tells us they're a farmer and a shepherd. Obviously, many years have gone by till they grew up into these professions. But the Torah is entirely silent on how the parents related to these two boys. So Cain, you would think at this point, if we only read this far in the story, we think the whole story is going for Cain. Cain is firstborn. For Cain is named. Cain is named as a man who was acquired from the Lord. Cain is a farmer. Everything is good for Cain. Abel is not named. Abel is a vanishing breath, a wind, nothing. And Abel's a wanderer. He's a shepherd. There's nothing there. We would think Cain is in first place. But then the story tells us a curveball. And Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of the firstlings of his flock. The Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering. Uh-oh. Here comes Abel. He sees his older brother brought an offering of fruit, and he can't bring fruit because he's not a farmer. He's a shepherd. So he brings, and the Torah specifies, he brought from the firstlings. He brought from the best of his flock. He brought from the fat of his offerings to the Lord. So now suddenly we see that Abel one-ups his older brother. Yes, Cain went first. Cain's older brother. Cain thought of it first. But Abel sees his older brother bringing an offering, and he brings even a better offering. You see, Cain, I outdid you. And the strange part is, and the Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering. He paid no heed to Cain. To Cain and his offering, he paid no heed. Cain was much distressed and his face fell. Well, this is a strange behavior by God. What's going on? As we're saying, God is all-knowing. The story is trying to teach us some kind of lesson. Why in the world did God not show equal love for both offerings, or give Cain first place? Cain brought it first. Cain did the best he could. So our commentaries say, look, if you look at the thing carefully, it looks like Cain's offerings were just plain fruit, but Abel's were the firstlings, the best from the fat of his crop, of his animals. So he deserved more. He did a better offering. But let's stop. God isn't hungry. God doesn't need apples and pears, and he doesn't need lambs. What was God interested in? God was interested in the sentiment that went behind it. So somehow or other, our commentators say that if God turned down Cain's offering, it meant he didn't have trust in Cain's intentions. In other words, Cain brought this offering, but with a deficient sense of love or admiration or respect for God. It's not in the text, but we have to try to figure out, why did God turn him down? So anyway, so Cain was much distressed and his face fell. Who is Cain angry at? If you were Cain and you had brought an offering, and then your younger brother brought an offering, and God somehow showed favoritism to the second brother, to the younger brother, who are you angry at? Well, on one level, you're angry at God, directly at God. God is the one who rejected my offering. God is the one who favored my brother. I'm angry at God, but I can't hit God. So what do? I have to take it out on my brother, which is a typical thing that human beings have. If we can't strike out at some more powerful, we hit somebody less powerful, that we have more power over them. Now, why is he angry at Abel? He's angry at Abel because Abel brought an offering and Abel's was accepted. Did Abel do anything wrong? And if you just look at the surface of the story, Abel didn't do anything wrong. Abel brought an offering, and out of the goodness of his heart, and Abel didn't tell God to like his offering. God just showed favoritism to Abel, but Abel didn't ask for favoritism. In fact, it looks like he's an innocent sheep himself. He brought an offering, and now his brother hates him. His brother's angry at him. What did he do wrong? So we go further. The Lord says to Cain, why is your face fallen? What do you mean? Of course his face is fallen. Of course he's angry. God is asking a rhetorical question. And then the next verse, everyone has trouble translating. It's a very complicated verse. So I'm just going to translate it the way it normally is understood. If you do right, there is uplift. It means if you do right, Cain, you'll be fine. Don't worry. Don't get it. You know, life isn't always fair. This time you lost, your brother won. But if you do the right thing in the future, you'll succeed. You'll rise also. Don't worry. But if you do not do right, sin couches at the door. But if you have lust, anger, desire, jealousy, don't you watch out, Cain. The sin is right at the door waiting to come in. It's urges toward you. A human being has a desire to sin, to hate, to be jealous. But you have the power to control that evil inclination, that power, that is sin. So now let's go back to what the story is possibly telling us. The beginning of humanity, there are two branches, the farm branch, the shepherd branch. At first, it looks like the shepherd branch, the farm branch is going to win because Cain is stronger, Cain is firstborn, everything looks like it's in Cain's favor. But then God shifts the pattern and gives favoritism to the shepherd. And that would actually stop civilization from developing if we all became shepherds. Cain doesn't like this, so Cain strikes out at his brother. He can't strike out at God very much. He strikes out at his brother. But God, before he strikes out at his brother, God comes and says, listen, Cain, I'm God, and I know that human beings have great passions. I know how you feel. I just wanted to teach you a lesson. A, life isn't always fair. B, firstborns aren't always privileged. C, just if you do your thing, you'll succeed. Okay, you lost this time. Don't give up. Next time you'll do better. So there's a lesson to humanity that life is not fair. That's number one. And two, you are in control of things. Even if you have a tendency to be jealous or you have a tendency to be angry, you have the power to control it. Now, if you or me got that instruction directly from God, what would we do? We would say, oh, okay, fine. God, you're the God. You know more than I do. I'll try to be better next time. That's what we would think we would do. But that's not what happens. What happens after Cain is warned specifically by God and given a chance to repent, so to speak, and to become better, Cain comes to Abel and says, come, let us go out into the field. And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. He killed his brother. God just told him, you have the power to control your anger. You have the power to control your jealousy. And you can live a perfectly good life. And what did Cain do? He ignores God's own advice. What's the Torah teaching us? The Torah is teaching us that even if God comes and tells us directly, you be a good boy, you be a good girl, and you're going to get rewarded and you can do better, even if God himself talks to us, we're still bad. We still have urges we can't control. We hate, we're jealous, and we're going to be violent, which is part of humanity's eternal problem. We all go back to Cain, whether we like to admit it or not. The real story of Cain and Abel is a story about every human being. Within us, we have both Cain and Abel, and we have both qualities. Now I'm going to go back a bit to the original story of Cain and Abel. Was Abel entirely innocent? There's a wonderful essay by Elie Wiesel, and he says Abel was not innocent. Why? Elie Wiesel says as follows. When Cain's offering was not accepted and his face fell, he felt terrible. Abel saw that his brother was suffering. Why didn't Abel go to Cain and say, listen, brother Cain, I'll come with you. Let's make another offering. Don't worry, I love you. We're fine. I don't understand. He didn't make any effort at all, at least in the Torah's description. He made no effort at all to appease Cain. And therefore, says Elie Wiesel, if you see someone suffering and you don't intercede to try to help, you're also guilty. You're also guilty. Elie Wiesel would like to give us all a guilt trip. There's a famous poem by Lord Byron called Cain. And in that story that Byron writes, he starts it off by saying Cain, at the very beginning of existence, was already angry and full of hate. Before this thing ever happened between him and Abel, what does Byron say? The story starts that Cain is angry that his parents sinned and that they were deprived from living in the Garden of Eden. Cain was deeply wounded. He says, what kind of parents are you? You ate from the Garden of Eden. We're stuck out in the wilderness here. Now we have to be farmers. We have to work, we have to slave. And it's all because of you lousy parents. You shouldn't have made that sin. And all the other people, Cain and Adam and Eve and Abel, they all bring offerings to God. And according to the Midrash, Cain and Abel were each created with a sister also, by the way. And Byron must have known that because the sisters are also their wives. In those days, they had to marry their sisters because there were other women around. So Byron puts the woman into the story also. But no one tried. But they tried at first to appease Cain. Get rid of your anger, Cain. Bring offerings with the rest of us. And Cain says, "No, I'm angry at God. I'm not going to do it." That's Byron's reading of it. But later in the poem, when Cain is rejected by God, Abel comes to him and says, "Listen, brother Cain, I'll help you build another altar. I'll help you bring another offering. Surely God will accept your offering." Abel tries, but the story doesn't have anything of that at all. Meanwhile, poor Cain gets blasted. Now, there's another wonderful novel by Miguel de Unamuno, one of my favorite authors, Spanish writer, and it's called Abel Sanchez. It's a long, short story. And here's how he describes the story. The two characters, one is a representative of Cain. His name is Joaquin, Cain, and the other one's name is Abel, Abel. And they grow up together. They're the best of friends, supposedly, but Cain hates Abel from day one. Why? Everyone likes Abel. No one likes Cain. They go to school. All the friends gather around Abel, and Cain is left aloof. Joaquin falls madly in love with his cousin, Helena. He wants to marry her. And who do you think Helena marries? Abel. She rejects Cain. She marries this so-called friend of his that he hates. They go through the whole life with it. Abel becomes a great artist, and Cain becomes a doctor, but he never achieves the great fame that he wanted. Abel has all the fame. Abel has all the fanfare, and Cain always feels frustrated. He's saturated with hatred. So now, they're studying together. So strangely enough, they're discussing the story of Cain and Abel. Okay. So Cain says as follows, or Joaquin says as follows. Hasn't it occurred to you that if Cain had not killed Abel, it would have been Abel who would have ended up killing Cain? In other words, it's fated that human beings are going to hate each other. It's fated that there's going to be jealousy. And if Cain didn't kill Abel, Abel would have killed Cain. So Abel in the story says, "How can you think such a thing?" So Cain says, "Abel's sheep were acceptable to God, and Abel the shepherd found grace in the eyes of the Lord." Okay. His favorite was Abel, the God-forsaken was Cain. So Abel says, what fault of that was Abel? Abel didn't do anything, he was innocent. You think, do you, that the fortunate are the favored one are not to blame? The truth is they are to blame for not concealing. In other words, Abel must have been showing off. Oh, look at me. God liked my offering, not yours. As soon as if you're a person of distinction and you show yourself to be distinguished, you're going to invite jealousy. So according to the Unamuno's understanding, Abel's great sin was not only did he not try to pacify Cain, but he lorded it over him. I brought a better offering. Oh boy, God likes me. God chose me. Every gratuitous favor, every privilege not earned on proper merit, for not concealing this grace, instead of making an ostentatious show of it, I have no doubt but that Abel flaunted his favor on the snouts of Cain's beasts, etc., etc. Those who believe themselves to be the company of the just tend to be supremely arrogant, and they crush others. Now, this is a completely off-the-wall thought, but I think in some subtle way, this might also be at the root of anti-Semitism. Why? Our Torah and we claim Jews are the chosen people. Well, as soon as you're the chosen people, you're a target. As soon as you become, even if you don't flaunt it, but if you, well, we do flaunt it. We say we're the chosen people. It's in the Bible. Everyone reads we're the chosen people. So as soon as you say you're the chosen people, that immediately invites jealousy and antagonism. So no matter how good we are, or no matter how bad we are, it's almost irrelevant. Once it looks like God showed us favoritism, that is the worst thing that could have happened to us. God, by favoring Abel, Abel got clobbered. it's best to be neutral or to be quiet, not to be ostentatious about it. So look, we're stuck being the chosen people in our own understanding of that term, but we understand it to be chosen to help others, chosen to be a light unto the nations. That's how we see it. And we're correct. But other people see us, they call it Jewish supremacy. That's the current anti-Semitic word, Jewish supremacy. We're better than everybody else. We think we're so terrific. As soon as you think you're so terrific, you lord over others, don't forget, they also have feelings, and there's a Cain in the world, and they're going to get you. So really, the story also teaches us, yes, we're chosen, but we should emphasize our goodness, our kindness. We should, in fact, try to be a light to the nations. Not that we're better than anybody. We're different from others, but different doesn't necessarily mean better. That's an aside. Anyway, let's go back to the story here. Oh, I want to go back to another thing. There's a wonderful novel by Steinbeck, John Steinbeck, called, interestingly enough, East of Eden, right? East of Eden is a tremendous novel. It's really also based entirely on the story of Cain and Abel, because Cain went and lived east of Eden. He's straight from the Bible. And it's also carried two brothers, one of whom is a farmer, and one of whom wants to be a priest. And it's a long story, what he finally becomes. Right? It's a long novel. I'm not going to go into the whole novel now. But there's the one who's the Cain character. They have a person who lives in the house, a servant, Chinese fellow, Lee. And Lee said, you know, the story of the Cain and Abel in the Bible, we're Chinese, we don't know Hebrew, but we studied with rabbis who know Hebrew, and they said there's a word in this story called timshol. It's really timshol. He didn't pronounce Hebrew correctly. Timshol means thou mayest. You may be in control of the evil inclination. You have it within you to be able to get over the jealousy. And therefore, the story really is, even though this person feels frustrated and turned down and rejected, even by his own father, Lee tells him, you have the power to overcome all these negative feelings and live a good life. Don't let those feelings destroy you. In the case of Unamuno's novel, this poor Joaquin was so full of hatred. Let me just tell you the end of the story, which is really very interesting. Joaquin and Abel, they're these antagonists, although Abel doesn't hate Joaquin at all. But Joaquin hates Abel's success and popularity, and he's nothing. As it turns out, Abel has a son, and Joaquin has a daughter. And the son of Abel wants to study medicine. He doesn't want to be an artist like his father. So he comes to Joaquin to teach him. So Joaquin finally has a victory. He's able to teach Abel's son medicine. But he doesn't feel completely successful. So he has a daughter, and he wants the daughter to marry Abel's son, so that the daughter and the son marry. And what happens? So the two lines, Cain and Abel, are now together, and a baby boy is born. What are they going to name the baby boy? They argue this way and that way. They end up naming him Joaquin, also Cain. They named the baby Cain. He won that. And now, as the baby's growing up, the baby loves his grandfather Abel and doesn't care that much for his grandfather Joaquin. So Joaquin's going wild. All my life, this guy, he stole my wife, he stole my fame, he stole my glory, everything he's taken away from me. And now he's going to take away my grandson also. So he goes over to the Abel, who's now an old man and sick. And he says, how could you just leave that grandson? Let me at least have some nachat in my life. Let me take care of this grandson. Let the grandson love me. So Abel said, I'm not in control of this boy's emotions. I can't tell him to love you. He loves you, he doesn't love you. You know, you're just not a likable guy. What can I do? I'm not likable. He goes, he grabs him by the neck, and the guy has a heart attack and dies. Cain kills Abel again. He didn't actually kill him. The guy had a heart attack, but is raising his hands against him. So poor Cain lives his whole life in this full of hatred and full of violence and full of jealousy. He never was able to overcome it. That's Cain at its worst. But the East of Eden, the emphasis really is, the side plot is, Tatim Shol, you have the power to get over it. So the real story of the Bible isn't the Cain that gets destroyed. The real story of the Bible is you have the power to overcome it. Now let's go a little further in the story. So God comes to Abel. God says to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And Cain said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Well, come on. It's a very famous biblical story. Am I my brother's keeper? Of course you're your brother's keeper. God says, what have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Therefore you shall be more cursed than the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the soil, you're a farmer, right? But if you till the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You're going to become a ceaseless wanderer on earth. You're going to become an Abel. You're going to become a shepherd. You're going to wander. In other words, God is telling Cain, you thought you would destroy the shepherd. You're now the shepherd. You're going to wander. You thought you could be a good farmer. The land's not going to produce for you anymore. Cain said, my punishment is too great to bear. That's a heavy load. Why didn't God just kill Cain at that point? Life for life, capital punishment, start over from scratch. God somehow wanted Cain to continue to live to see if Cain could overcome this terrible experience of his. He says, you have banished me this day from the soil. I must avoid your presence. It says, mipanecha esater, means I'm going to be hidden from your presence, God. I have to live my whole life away from God. In other words, I can't come to you anymore. I brought an offering at the beginning. Now you've rejected me, and now you're cursing me. You and I are done, God. We have nothing more to talk about. I'm done. But how am I going to live that way? You told me I should be a restless wanderer on earth. Anyone who meets me may kill me. I'm a victim now. I'm going to get killed. God said, don't worry, no one's going to kill you. And anyone who kills you will get punished 7 times over. Okay. So it says, and Cain left the presence of the Lord, and he settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Now, what's the first thing that Cain did after this horrible, brutal experience? What does it say? Vayeda Cain and Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, Chanoch. And he then founded a city and named the city after his son Chanoch. Whoa, God just told him, you're going to be wanderer. You're going to be going from place to place. Cain said, you think so? I'm not going to go anyplace, God. I'm building a city. I'm staying in one place. You're not going to boss me around, God. And not only that, I'm going to name my son Chanoch. You know what Chanoch means? Chanoch is a strong name. Chanoch means dedicated, established. Chinuch, Chanukaz. This is a good name. I'm strong. I'm not moving around, God. I'm not afraid of you anymore. So this Cain has got a real mean streak in him. He's a tough fellow. That's a very odd. He didn't go into repentance. He didn't say, I want to go to a monastery and repent the rest of my life. He right away had a baby, and he built a city, and he said, I'm going to keep going. Now, if you skip further down, it says, and now Adam knew his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore a son. And what was the son's name that they gave? And she bore a son and named him Shet, which means God has established for me, God placed for me a replacement for Abel, because Cain has killed him. And then it says, and Shet also had a son, and he named him Enosh. It was then that men began to invoke the Lord by name. Now, there's 2 lines that are going to establish. One line is the line of Cain, and one is the line of Shet. These are the 2 sons now that are surviving in key roles in the story of Adam and Eve. If you go down 7 generations or so, almost all the names of those 7 lines are the same names, almost the same names. And the 7th line is Lemech. Each of them had a descendant named Lemech. Cain's Lemech was a murderer. But Cain's descendants also are the ones who established agriculture, developed musical instruments, developed tools. They were very productive. They were part of civilization. One thing that they lacked was a connection with God. They were secularists. Shet's family, it says right over from the very beginning, Enosh, and then men began to invoke the Lord by name. Already there's a godliness here. There's a spiritual family following Shet, and then there's a secularist family following Cain. The 7th one of Shet's line is Lemech. And who's Lemech's son? Lemech's son is Noach. Noach is going to be the savior, the righteous person who survives the generation. when the line of Cain and the line of Abel were intermarrying among each other, the forces of Cain succeeded. All humanity became evil again. They became alienated from God again. Only Lamech had one son who was able to save the situation. We'll talk about Noah next week. But the story of Cain and Abel, which is told in the Bible in such a simple way, is much more subtle if we try to fill in what happened to Adam and Eve when they heard that their son was being cursed by God. Did they intercede with God? Did they pray? Did they ask? Did they bring Cain back home? No reference to that. This was what you call a dysfunctional family, or at least from the Torah's point of view, there was no communication among them. There was no attempt to alleviate pain or to teach how we could overcome our jealousies, our anger. So if you read the story again with some of the insights I gave today, maybe it'll be, you'll be able to fill in the blanks. But the interesting thing about the biblical stories is they're not as simple as they look. The Torah says in a few lines, such profound messages and profound ideas that I quoted Byron, I quoted John Steinbeck, I quoted Unamuno, and so many others have taken these characters and tried to fill in the stories, but not just what happened to Cain and Abel, but a story of what happens to humanity itself. That we have this struggle. We have within us from the very beginning of humanity's existence, we have jealousy, hatred, and murder. We have all the ingredients that we're still suffering with today. We have too many Cains and Abels who don't try to pacify the Cains. And we have Adam and Eve who don't intercede to try to keep these brothers together. And therefore the result is separation, division, different separation from God, separation from each other. So that's the discussion for today. Next week we'll be doing Noah and the flood, and we'll also be doing the story of the Tower of Babel. So I wish you all a great day, and please, you've been very kind. A lot of you have actually emailed me and shared your ideas and thoughts. Please do so if you wish. mdangel@jewishideas.org. I'm glad to hear from you, and I try to answer everybody who comments to me. Okay, all the best. Shalom, shalom. Have a great day and stay healthy.